Hello everybody and welcome to another RCT2 review stream. Today we're going to go back in time again and take a look at X250's masterpiece, A Palette of Ideas. So this park was started in 2005 according to the park description, so I assume this is around 2006 or 2007 park. This is the largest piece of work that X250 or Simon put out, and it's pretty impressive. There's a lot to it. You can see it's a pretty sizable park for one. It definitely fits with the park planning mentality of the time, where we had a lot of big paths and no peeps. So unfortunately, there are no peeps in the park, nor is the park capable of holding peeps. The entrance isn't even connected up. So it's a little bit weird in that sense. I find a lot of these parks from this era kind of dead almost. Just because you don't have the vitality of the peeps. But I mean, I bought into this at the time also, just as far as the design mentality goes. But I think we're in a better place now as far as that kind of design goes. One thing that I should point out, when you first open this park, it comes zoomed in right here with X250's little entertainer here. And I always kind of liked this because it was just this little island or peninsula, I suppose, with the carousel here and some pretty just kind of cute little architecture and landscaping and everything. And then all of a sudden, once you zoom out, you just get this huge park around you. So that was kind of a neat touch. But let's start out here in the front and take a look at this whole thing. We start out in a absolutely massive front entrance plaza here. Have our monorail kind of going across some of these broken arch pieces. Almost feels like a little bit of a Rivers of Babylon-esque hint there with those supports. And then you can also see into the park here on the side with the water coaster. We have a big times guide here with the scrolling signs. A little bit odd that the times guide is over here and not anywhere in the main space, but kind of interesting too, though, that you can get up into the monorail and take the monorail from here all the way back to the backside here by the launch coaster. So we have the little park maps here, which is kind of a neat thing. I'm pretty sure this was before the 1K Park Maps object or Maps Rack object. So we come in here at this sort of castle-esque architecture with some pretty interesting tall towers. On the back side of this building, we have a pretty nice sized fountain there, although you can't see it because there's plants all around it, which is sort of an odd choice. Same thing with these rapids pieces over top. I don't know if this is meant to be like a sluice coming across to this area here or not, but we have our ticket booths down here, £29.99, which is a steal as far as I'm concerned, park-wise. So a couple of those ticket booths on the way in. And then we're into our front area here. So this is our front plaza where we have the a nice little seating area here and a couple little small cute buildings here using the Spanish tile type roof, this sort of Mediterranean-ish color scheme and everything, and then working up to the lake over here. And then we have our kind of lakeside viewing area here where you can kind of look across the lake at all the rest of the park going on. Have a queue here to this riverboat, which is interesting. This riverboat object, I'm not quite sure where it originated, but it's definitely built in RCT, just scaled down and plopped in as an object. So it's a little bit of an odd thing because it feels a little bit out of scale and almost like it would be better set as some kind of a ride almost. But anyway, so there it is. So over here, after the carousel, we get to our first actual kind of attraction is the King's Garden Crazy Golf, which is pretty living up to its name. Once you get in here, you can kind of see there's a lot of little bits and pieces and tunnels and over climbing areas, open over top, some fencing and some other things. Kind of reminds me of a simpler version of how Kumba does his miniature golf courses with the pretty crazy designs and everything. Kind of hard to see, honestly, as you're going around, but just turning, you can kind of see all the crossovers and up and downs and all the various bits and pieces there. But nice little thing nestled in there behind the building. Coming out to this area where we looked at initially, you can see this carousel for whatever reason just across from the first one. So I'm not sure what the difference is there. This is the Century Carousel out here with the little dining area that's next to it, which is kind of a nice idea, although I guess it must be fed from this spot here. But anyway, let's continue over to our first of the big areas here. You can follow the train that's coming across here, which is interesting. So you can see the train backing its way up along here. It's a shuttle, so it's one back and forth route, but it's got 4 stations before it goes back the other way. Almost seems like a monorail would have been better suited for it, but you know, it's an interesting choice. I'm not sure I've ever really seen that. So here I have a little elephant magic ride coming along here, Dumbo-esque from Disney, and then we come into this more, I guess, Arabian-ish area, barring this guy over here, which take a look at all of this, and it is not readily apparent what it is. It's the Delight Factory, and then down here we have Matamba, which seems somewhat unrelated. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is with this guy. I don't actually know if there was a read-me with this park at the time. I'm sure it was probably explained. But then we also have over here our little boating adventure little dock here. And then just this seating area and other thing on its island in itself. I'm not quite sure how you were meant to get there, potentially from here over to here, I'm guessing, between those couple, but not readily apparent. And then up under here we have Relic, another little flat ride with some of these more Middle Eastern-ish decorations. So the big coaster here is Turkish Delight, which is substantial for one. It is an absolutely massive suspended coaster. The layout is a little bit all over the place, which we can take a look at here. So it's theoretically an aero suspended coaster, 3 trains, 6 cars per train. 6 cars is about what those were doing. Some of them have 5, but that sounds about right. So we're waiting on the block brakes for this guy here. So let's hang tight for a minute here until that guy pulls through on the lift 2. But on the whole, I thought the coasters in this park were okay. This one is maybe not my favorite just because there's a lot going on with it. Oddly, he didn't place a block at the bottom of the lift hill here. So here we go as we come off of this lift hill. Good to have a catwalk underneath, although there weren't really good catwalk objects for these rides at the time. Anyway, first drop into an airtime hill, which is not something you typically see on suspended coasters, so this is not quite what you're looking for. It's a little bit tight for the speed, but the meandering is cool around these various bits and pieces of structure here. As we come up through this little flatter section here, you can see the little bit of hill here, and then this flat section up over the pathway, the curves, and then up. Cool custom supports for the time. These were the custom supports of choice, and I think he did a pretty nice job there. Not necessarily arrow influenced, but they do look nice. At least is the attempt there. Really, when you're building suspended coasters, you really want to make sure that you're emphasizing the swinging and less so the hills. So like this drop is fine, but that climb is generally okay because you're a little bit slower. This is a cool little helix here, how it twists on itself, and then we're going to dive down again into this turn here. Really, the second half of this coaster is a lot better than the first half. You're definitely doing, more proper elements, I would say, kind of except for this guy here. You really want to avoid those kind of hills. Really, your height changes are going to be with diving corners and climbing corners like this, or helix elements like that. You can kind of drop, but I would say generally try and avoid any kind of big climbs or airtime hills without. Not a lot of brake run space here. Typically, you want enough brake run to hold all the trains, so this really ought to be like out to here somewhere. Suspended coasters in this game are huge as far as trains go, so it is a little bit of a challenge trying to figure out what goes on there. So But I mean, that was not something that we really thought a huge amount about back at this point. So you can kind of forgive that. This is a neat little support kind of pentagram looking thing here, with some cool different elements here. The station itself is kind of all over the place with structures. I mean, you have the wood roof here, the Spanish roof here, the shake roof here, this other kind of shake roof, this shake roof, Spanish roof in a different color, these steps. So it is a little bit all over, but I do like the size of it. It's definitely imposing, especially this side. And the queue kind of goes along here out on this peninsula of sorts. Jumping over to this side, we have the Legend of Isis. This is a splash boats type ride with a pretty sizable drop here. So we have a drop, and then we have a couple of other pieces of track here that I guess are also meant as waterfall type elements. We're using the Ultra Twister coaster as the lift. And then it kind of goes a little bit all over here. So we have the station here, which I do like the station, open air, but has the little awnings and coverings over top of it. Back at this time of building, there was a lot of focus on these open air stations, and then the queue lines with the regular path that come up and do this. I mean, you'll notice there are no RCT queue lines in here because this was not set up for peeps. This was never intended that peeps would use it. So I think this is kind of what was standard to be expected at the time. What's a little bit weird about the splash boats ride is that there's no guide here, so we fall off the track here and then we're into the water, sort of free flowing, and it works its way around up and down, and then kind of head over to this side where we're going to drop down. And then there's some guide here, which is kind of nice, but then it curves back around and then rejoins the track here, so it's not quite obvious how that's working or why that's working, but something to consider as you build these kind of rides. Generally, you want to track. Pretty simple looking waterfalls here. I think now the amount of quarter tiles we have to work with really can help break these up a little bit. But there is some cool terrain variation here, although you can definitely kind of call out where the terrain was needed once you zoom out, because all the terrain is really just for the purposes of terrain coasters and things like that, or rides. So this guy, for this one, here's a little bump on the side, and this one has the wooden coaster on it. But let's continue on. We have this 1001 Nights ride here, Carpet Magique, nice queue line, and the landscaping was always nice. I kind of like the style of landscaping, using the hedges for the wall elements, and then just kind of really overdoing it almost. Honestly, for a park this size, I'm a little surprised he didn't hit the object limit. But next we have this really gigantic custom top spin, which I love it. It's just way too big. Like way out of scale from everything else. Doesn't work, but honestly, that's kind of okay with me. I think this is cool with the cracked landscape here, and then the water jets and everything up underneath of it. It's just way too big. Definitely not in the scale of everything else that's going on around. All right, so now we're going to transition into this next area here. Same path type, but we definitely get a different color palette. So we've kind of traded the golds and the magentas over here for blues and peach on this side, with that similar sort of base color with the tans and the browns. So this is where our mini railway ends. So you can kind of see, if we follow that around, it kind of works its way through here and kind of goes all over the place here. Lots of little curves all the way around, over, back, and then around. And here we can find him backing up to this side. So if you're waiting, you're going to be waiting quite a while for this guy to get from here through 4 stations and back again. So you better choose your ride carefully. Alrighty. On this side, we've got a couple of different rides and attractions. Down here, there's the harbor with another dock platform here, and the kind of pathway used as docks. A few other little flat rides. We have the Space Rings, the Rings of Saturn ride. Here's a Scrambler. This is called Sprawl. And then there's a Enterprise here. Sicarius, I suppose. And then here we are with the big coaster. So this is Oceanus. This one, it notes, was a collaboration with Artist, and it is a B&M sit-down coaster. Pretty big one at that. Really nice open station. I do like this with the canopies over top and then the little towers on either side. And this was a kind of a pretty style at the time, I thought. And same with the custom supports and everything. So here we go off the drop. No pre-drop here, which probably should have been there. But other than that, this isn't a bad layout with a loop into a dive loop and cobra roll. Once we get through the cobra roll, we're going to shoot right back underneath the pathway. Definitely some struggles there with the pacing through the tunnel, pathway across. Fast corner through a 0G roll. Then into this low corner here into a bat wing. Up and through. And then we're going to head up underground for quite a while until we pop out on this side and hit this pretty complex section of corkscrews here. It's an interlocking corkscrew, but they're interlocked a little bit strangely in how they kind of goes off and does its own thing for a while before it comes back and comes around to the brake run. Again, not a big enough brake run, and this transfer track is a little bit suspect. I mean, it works. It's just this is a little bit odd. What I do like here is the queue, how it wraps all the way up underneath, doing all this different kind of bits and pieces, and then over here underneath the coaster itself. I think that's pretty cool. Pathway over top of the cobra roll is neat. It's got a lot of inversions. It has 9, so that would be the B&M record for sure. Interesting, definitely, with the as far as path layout goes. I know I've mentioned this in a couple of the last streams, just how too much path can be a thing, and there definitely is a lot of path here, probably too much. There's really no reason this bridge needs to be four wide, because you're not really going from anything to anything, and I feel like this path gets a little bit repetitive after a while, and it ends up being too much. But over here we have this pretty darn cool sculpture. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's impressive. X250 did a lot of this kind of stuff in some of his earlier things. There's definitely a lot of stuff like that to look at. Seeing the station from the other side, you have this neat water feature down here at the bottom, and then the actual ending of the queue line up here with the different gates, and I do like that a lot. This tower is a little bit all over the place again with textures, but there's a lot to see there. And then we get to this, which I love for most all of it. So the parts that I love about this are the tower itself, because this is made entirely with custom scenery pieces, so you can do the little checkerboard pieces here. I love this little top bit there, and the triangles in the station are neat. What I don't like about it is that it's an air launch, and you really don't see that at all with this kind of a ride. I would much rather have seen this be a drop tower, but cool to see this with the invisible drop tower, actual drop tower with the custom piece. I think X250 was the first one to do that. He's the first one that I can recall anyway, but I'm a big fan of it. Over here we have Mousetrap. So this is kind of a custom wild mouse that kind of goes all over the place. Actually, I kind of like it. It's a lot of wide turns, some diving stuff, and then a couple of little tight ones here at the end. But it doesn't follow any particular patterns, but it looks nice. I like the red and the blue kind of offset against the green of the landscape below. Definitely a good look as far as I'm concerned. Kind of does feel like an afterthought over here on the corner, but it's nice. All right, let's turn around and we'll head over to this next area where we have a pretty big shift in colors and textures and paths. So we have this kind of reddish sandy path on this side. So we have a new for 2006. So this is the Kiaz Temple, which is a temple, as you can see. So it's kind of steps pyramid looking thing going on there. So this little simulator in here is the new ride for the year. Over here we have a Chance Chaos, Rising Sun. I love the colors on that. Honestly, I really like the yellow offset with the dark orange. I think that's always a good look. And a Teacups ride here, kind of sunk down, which I like. So everybody can kind of come up and look down on the ride happening. You can kind of go either way with either raising it up or putting it down, but I like the elevation change with it and all of that. Over here we have the third carousel in the park, which is a little bit odd perhaps, but so it goes, because you do have a limited amount of things to work with. So this is more kind of Asian-esque. We're using the little huts as decoration pieces here. A little bit difficult considering that they don't really offset, or they kind of offset from all the other architecture here. It's a little bit harder to, or they stand out maybe a little bit much. But we do have that kind of dark red architecture with all the bamboo pieces and different things. The foliage does set off pretty well from everything else in this area. But let's jump to this coaster because this is the big guy. It says Red Dragon, using the typical colors you expect from a Chinese type thing. So we have 9-car trains, which is one too long. Unless you're doing Alpengeist, you probably want to do 8 or less. But let's have a look at train 2 here, which will take off here in just a minute. Alrighty. So odd choice with the continuous circuit mode, especially with a mid-course brake run here in the middle. Usually you kind of avoid that here, but we're going to go up a relatively quick lift here. Not too bad, but it's a pretty short lift for as long as this ride is. So we're going to dive off into a corkscrew right away, kind of Nemesis style, starting off into a downward helix and a big loop. Here we are, and then we're going to do this the little 3-point turnaround to an Immelman, pop up and over, and then into this covered area that is our mid-course brakes. Not using those mid-course brakes, we're going to shoot out of that into loop number 2, over the pathway, and down to this pretty interesting dive over top of the water. Probably my favorite bit on the ride because it's a really neat scenic space. 2 more loops and or corkscrews into an Immelman, and then a final helix up into the brake run, which is a little bit diagonal, and then straight. Really struggling back there to finish, which does kind of make sense based on the shortness of the lift hill and the longness of the ride. Again, a ton of inversions on this one. This one's 7. As far as B&M notes go from a realism standpoint, you don't do 2 corkscrews back to back. It's generally a little bit weird to have 2 Immelmans on the ride with 2 loops as well. But on the rest of this is generally all right. Not hugely bad by any means. So coming back onto this side, kind of retracing our steps to the other side, we have this pretty neat kind of diamond pattern climb up to the top of this little mountain here, where we have a log flume. So the log flume, this is a boat jumping. Is what it's called. So it looks like all this ride is just a drop down into the water and then turn around and come back. This could be based on some of the rides that were in Japan, and there also were some older rides where you ride down this into and splash out into an open space of water, and then there would be an operator on the back who would actually kind of jump as it landed into the water and land back on the boat. So I'm not quite sure if that's what it's intended to be, but it's kind of nestled off here in the corner. I guess you have this little bit of a viewing space by this tower here. But we do have another water ride on this side. There's a rapids ride over here, right by this kind of giant creature thing. So this is the River Yangtze. We do have a track on this one, which is a little bit of a strange one. Nice in the fact that it tells you where you're going, but it's not quite obvious as to how it's held on there. In a lot of these cases, you kind of see a channel more so, like even a sunken rapids ride that has the water up around it kind of looks like it fits a little bit there. But neat lift climb, definitely neat drop using the standard pagoda item there. Queue line is on the, so this is Red Dragon. So this is actually the queue line for the coaster, which is a weird spot for the queue line. Looking at the design of this area, it kind of looks like you've got your whole plaza here, and then you kind of have this back door pathway around the backside. I'd really expect the queue line entrance for the coaster to be somewhere down here, even through here or on the side. Doesn't really make sense back here. You do have this dragon here, which I guess was the identifier, but you generally want to tie your queue line to the ride itself, because I would have thought that the rapids ride, being the drop is over there, might have been that way, but this looks to be where the entrance is meant to be, since I think this is sort of the curved station for it. But You can kind of see how this ride wraps all the way around following the track here. I won't follow the whole thing along, but you go up a little hill here, weave your way back and forth around this side, up the drop, and then or up the lift and down this big drop, and then you kind of wind your way back. It looks like a pretty long ride. Let's take a look. A 7-minute ride, which is pretty substantial. Boat rides of this time tended to be a little bit long. This is sort of an interesting juxtaposition right here with the double cork in the same orientation as the double cork right here. A little bit of a weird one, perhaps, but let's move along to this guy. So this is Tropica, according to this Bays of Tropica, sorry. And it's a fruit-themed area, which I always recall this area as being one of my favorites just because it was kind of an off-the-wall theme, but I did kind of like it. So the main coaster here is Tropicana. I don't know if it's sponsored. I assume it is. But we have this odd mixed type ride. I'm not quite sure what it was meant to be. It's a vertical drop coaster, but it's got a 4-car train using the floorless cars, steep lift, vertical drop, curve up and around into this dive loop here, some more curves into an Immelman, a roll, a loop, and 2 corkscrews. Not realistic kind of by any means, but the layout's got a lot of nice flow to it, and I kind of like it. The colors are different and unique. You see your different fruits here. So we have apple and I guess orange. It could be a pear and maybe pineapple and some grapes perhaps or anything like that. The banana swing over here is pretty fantastic. Bananarama is the name of the ride, but I'm a big fan of that. And it's sort of an odd little area, just kind of squeezed in here amongst some of these other more gigantic areas. But I do like it. So there's that hold brake on the drop up through a probably much too fast inversion, especially considering that's the same height as these inversions over here, and they're far later in the ride. So you get that little roll there into the loop, double cork, and then back. For once, big enough brake run for sure. Definitely another open station here. And then over here we have the orange, which has a nice little piece of greenery on top on the Super Loop design. So clever idea, just interesting theming. Transition over here to sort of another weird theme as far as so far we've been to more place-based themes like this Arabian area, this sort of Mediterranean-ish area, this Asian type area, then fruit. And then we get to this side, which is racing themed area. So this is the Kingdom of Speed. And we have 2 coasters. So here's Grand Prix Legend, which Ty Endor had built. And it's actually a pretty cool coaster. So we'll wait for that guy to get back before we look at it. And then up here we have Dragsters with a Z. A little car ride that kind of wraps around this whole area up above the rest, so you can kind of look down at everybody as you queue through this whole area here. So I think this is the queue for the coaster here. So yeah, here's the station for this ride, which has kind of a neat thing viewable from the water here, although I don't think anybody's going to see it from that side, but pretty neat design. But anyway, let's get back to this coaster now that we're parked here. A couple interesting notes is the double station here. Obviously not working, but pretty cool that it's a thought. Working transfer track that would make sense, holding 3 trains. And then we have our brake run here just before the launch with the Christmas tree lights, and then we have the alternating colors, red and white, for the launch itself. So let's take a watch on this guy here as we fire off up the top hat element that uses the quad rail track here. Nicely done. Then we're going to go up and over this fast airtime hill, some super high G's there through the corner. This pretty giant Immelman type thing, and then sort of half of a flying snake dive with the roll into the corner, very Storm Runner-esque. Far turnaround here out over the water. Love this, how it passes through the support. Airtime hill at a more reasonable pace, and then we get to this little kind of flat S's section through the train or through the track, up and over that final hill in. Kind of like this high gear chicane is what the sign says, with the unbanked little weaves throughout here. It's just fun. It's a different take on things, different idea. pathway kind of comes across here. I'd almost kind of expect some stands there, maybe so you can come watch the coaster snake its way through. But got our little beach area here. Come to the backside here, and here is the other end of that monorail. And then over on this side, we've got our, this is the Raleigh Karting Company. So don't know if that means this park is set in Raleigh, North Carolina, or where that might be from. So here's the turbine axle. So two Ferris wheels opposed to each other, but I really like that look. I think it gives it some interesting, unique motion and just different design to the whole thing. And then we already mentioned the car ride here that's kind of up over top of everything through this kind of random glass building with this thing coming out of it. I'm not quite sure where that architecture fits in with the rest of it, but this whole area kind of has this more Mediterranean-ish architecture with some of these sculpted pieces. I don't know if those are more modernist type things as far as the racing element goes, but not quite sure. It's a little bit not sure what it wants to be, I think. But these supports are pretty neat using the 4D track on the whole element there. Almost needs a third one in the back, but I do like that they've thought through the different pieces, like this ladder up to the top and some other bits and pieces. I mean, there's definitely a lot of thought behind what happens in this park. But let's turn around and have a look at the other side. Before we transition on, this is kind of a neat little thing here. So this, according to the sign, is the aquarium. And if you look down here, there's some hidden rapids track. So this is a shoal of tuna, and this is a shoal of catfish. And you can see the buried glass here. So it's an aquarium that's underwater in the main lake here. And then it looks like this is kind of meant to be an aquarium piece as well. A fun little detail that I almost wish was fleshed out a little bit more. Even like a ride through some of these things, like a dark ride maybe, would have been kind of fun. So anyway, as we get into this area here, so this is Storm, a 3D experience. Kind of blends in there a little bit, but I do like the building here. We're kind of transitioned back into this red, sandy pathway texture with more wood elements, some greens, some yellows, some whites. You'll see kind of carry through all of this space here. So this is, according to the sign, Western Frontiers. So we have your swinging ship here. So this is the Blade, and then our cafe on the side here, and then Old Pete's Flowers. I do like that we used a lot of signs here. So X is using a bunch of the different signs to kind of explain what these buildings are. I feel like we've gotten away from that in a lot of cases. Although what he's not done here that we do now is really plopped an actual working shop inside that tells you what it is. But I do like that you can kind of mouse over some of these things and see that this is meant to be vending machines right here, and some of these other just little fun bits of stuff. All right, so there's one train here, so we're going to wait for him to get back as we go up. Again, pathways that are wide. This is 5 across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 across. Way too big. Definitely not needed. But here you have our shootout game area, which I kind of like that design. And are we back yet? We're almost back. Let's hang on to that. We'll take a look at this in the meantime. This is an impulse coaster here that doesn't quite have enough length, but I do like the supports and everything else. This is Volcanzo with a Z. Have our flaming volcano here and our waterfall on this side, but nice impulse coaster. I like that it's the kind of standard one twist side, one spike side, although this one's got a little fun twist at the top of it on the back side there. So that's pretty interesting to see. Anyway, here we are out of the station. We got a quick little drop, actually a pretty long little pre-lift section before we have some breaks over top of this pathway, and then we head up the hill. Again, we were talking earlier about the train being used for the ride specifically, so this one follows this train pretty darn well. This is Diablo Tunner, so Devil Thunder, perhaps. And here we go, down our drop here, helix down. through the mountain, up and over a hill. Biggest drop on the ride right there underneath that little pathway or scenery piece. A couple diagonal airtime hills, and then we head up into some of these curves up through this spiral 540-ish helix before we go back diagonal through this kind of nice double down section. Turn here past the waterfall up over this hill, and then we're going to spiral out to the finish. Really doesn't follow any particular manufacturer's kind of design, but I don't really think he's ever really gone towards that kind of mentality. So if you don't, you don't. It's not like it's required by any means. So I think what was done there was pretty nice. So here is the Unexplained, which I kind of really like this queue line because it's got all these different like scenery pieces as you come through here. So you have like the witch's pot and the bones, but then you also have this little space thing, and then you have this like column of flame and these boxes and all sorts of stuff going up to the ride itself. So I think that's a neat little detail there, setting up the stage for this ride, kind of telling a story the whole way. But let's back our way down the mountain here, and then we're going to transition into this final area that doesn't have a name as far as I know. I can't see one. With a couple of bits here. So here it says Rapids Rounded Station, which is interesting because it's not a rapids ride, it's a boat ride. So this is Klondike Falls. I almost kind of wonder if this was meant to be a rapids ride initially and then just wasn't. And he went in a different direction perhaps. But this is another one of these that's a little hard to follow because there's no actual track to look at. You just kind of have to pick up on the different pieces. And it's a pretty long ride again, I'm sure, 6 minutes and 29 seconds. So we're not going to watch the whole thing, but we'll look at some of the highlights. I do like the working curved station, or the moving station at least. I don't know where he's put the actual start and stop for the ride itself, but I always like these motion stations. This one's bigger. Usually you see them as 4x4, not a 6x6. So this one's a little bit chonkier than most, perhaps. A little bit confused as to the rapids pieces on top of the building, but I'm not quite sure what those are meant to be. So here, if we go take a look underneath, we can kind of see it pops in and then up underneath, and then you pop up a little bit more or inside the mountain, and then you're going to hop out here through this little open spot, cross this little bridge, and then you have this cool double down into the splashdown here that kind of just opens up onto the open water again itself, and we can assume it picks up again back here. You do see that there's a different color texture to the landscape here, so we can kind of see it curve its way around there. But as you go through, it'll pick up on this side, and we can see a couple of more pieces here. So it'll pick up here, and then we'll see a couple of different elements there. This is a little dangerous, perhaps, because there's a big waterfall here and not much of a guard, but, YOLO, I suppose. So lots of little architecture, little scenic pieces. I do like a lot of these. This is a very old school feel to it. A lot of just terraced waterfalls and these little landscape elements squeezed throughout. This kind of built structure with all the wood blocks and the flames on top of it, and these windows, which I used to use all over the place. And then this queue coming in across this whole thing. I like this bridge back and forth and then out onto the main space there. So definitely brings back some nostalgia from my end. So let's head back up into here. This is Toadstool Village. You can see the sign there now. So we have our two toadstools here as we head up into this space. So a couple of different things. We have Squirrel Nutty Rail, and then up underneath of this we have the Oakwood Maze. Nice to see a hedge maze. Not a super common ride. And then maybe even less common is the pedal helicopter ride. Pretty long one at that. I think our entrance is over here. Yep. And come out and kind of covers the whole area, and then down and around. These kind of custom trees here with the reverse launch coaster track, and then you have the pretty sizable little foliage element there. So here you have Tree Tops, again with a Z. This is the water coaster. Back at this point of New Element's RCT building, it seemed like everybody had to do a water coaster in their main or in their park. So this is Masterpiece's obligatory water coaster, which starts out with a big drop into a water splash. Kind of neat to see the coaster station up high, and then everything else dropped around. So this is kind of into a big pit here, and then we're going to hit this first lift hill that is going to go up and over. It's a pretty long ride. We can kind of see how it just meanders around. A lot of the rides had this sort of meandering quality that just kind of went around and looked at a lot of different things. Interesting to have a little water splash here, transitioning right back to the coaster track, into our downward helix here, into another splash. And then we have a quick transition into the lift hill, just back to the water again, and then back to the coaster. So it was really utilized, not as realistic per se as you would see a lot of these, but really just transitioning right back and forth between coaster track, water track, coaster track, water track, as for whatever made kind of the most sense. Really, it's a water ride unless it's up high, in which case it's a coaster. I always did like this bit, though, from the lift hill around this custom tree, and then this kind of like 1, 2, 3 dive down into the splash before we get to our big climb, and then our double drop, which was another common thing that everybody liked to do in the old ones, where you had 2 drops, which is a real thing on older log flumes and everything. To space out the boats a little bit more, you would do 2 drops to make sure that they didn't hit each other, or the wake created by the one behind it didn't mess up the boat in front of it. So that is a thing, and that's to be an interesting design anyway. Here we have Crazy Critters, our little show theater here. This is kind of fun. This is the Sunflower Cafe, so the hack on the observation tower, so it just kind of bounces in place and turns. So I don't know if the cafe is meant to be inside there, or what that is meant to be. But then we also have the Flower Power Twist Scrambler ride there. And then over here we have a couple more. This is the Tulip Tower slide. And then we also have one of these Chance Sky Wheels. This is Morning Glory, that has the little roots coming out from the bottom of it. A lot of little architectural elements on here, and then sort of keeping with the same type architecture that sort of uses a lot of different elements, kind of all squeezed into one. I think a lot of times this architecture ends up looking kind of messy, but the way that X250 put these together, it generally works. I think it's cleaner in these sort of instances, where it's a lot more readable as what kind of a building it is and what kind of elements there are, than for, say, this or some of these other ones like this guy that just has a whole bunch of different elements. But I can kind of appreciate that there's a main tower here and a couple of sub towers with some general roof things. This works more than some of the other buildings like this guy, where we have a glass structure that has clearly nothing inside of it, and then this thing on the side. So you're not quite sure what it's meant to be, but still kind of interesting. But that actually wraps us up. That's our circle of the park. There are a lot of details in this, and I'm sure I've missed some of them, kind of cruising through here. I'm just trying to keep going. But that was a good look through an old park. X250 and I were pretty good friends back when we were building at the same time. So it was great to see him release this park, and see the community reaction to it. This one did not win Spotlight, which was a controversy. This one won the, I guess, runner-up or super runner-up, whatever it was at the time, but definitely did get robbed for a Spotlight as far as I'm concerned. It definitely has the size, and I think the quality is there, even if looking back at it these days, it's a little bit messy, and the coaster layouts are sort of all over the place. But there's a lot to look at, a lot to see, and it's definitely showcases his skill. It was a shame that we never saw any further builds from him, because I know he was working on some other parks as well. But we'll wrap up for now here. If you have a park that you would like to see reviewed, feel free to reach out to me at Cedar Point 6 on New Element once New Element is back up and running, or just leave a comment in the YouTube channel and I will definitely get to it. So until next time, let me know what you thought of this park, and we will catch you in the next stream. Thank you very much. Have a good day.